All right, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I want to start off with a little bit of some introductions. My name is Fabi. I am the National Partnership Manager for Study Smart Tutors, and I have with me here Mayana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mayana Edwards. I am the Director of Postsecondary Access and Success at Campus Compact for New Hampshire and New Hampshire College and University Council. It's just a big fancy title, which means I get to work on our Gear Up programming, which I love to do so much.
Yes, and Mayana and I actually met in grad school at Penn a couple of years ago already. So I'm excited to now, be out here with our careers and stuff and collaborating on a different, on a different platform and different experiences. So our mission at Study Smart Tutors, for those of you who don't know, we provide comprehensive programming to first generation students, their families, and we also do a couple of different things, but today we'll get started with our presentation here. A little bit of an agenda. So we already just covered introductions. We'll do a couple of icebreakers just to kind of warm up to everyone who's in the room. And then Mayana will go ahead and lead us with a book unlike me. At the end, we'll share our contact information. And of course, if there are any questions, we're happy to answer those. Some community agreements: come as you are, everything is an invitation, and welcome new experiences. So we want to make sure that everyone here is feeling comfortable, everyone here is feeling just ready to share, and feel free to use the chat box. Feel free to also just turn your mic on. We welcome all of it. So to get started, we have a mood meter icebreaker. So you can use the chat box and you can either tell us what quarter you're feeling, or you can tell us the specific mood that you are feeling. I'll give everyone a couple of minutes. I just placed mine there. Jack is hyper. Q1, Q4. Optimistic, I love that. Grateful, definitely. I am feeling humble. Cool, thank you. All right, so let's get started. So our first icebreaker here is, we want you all to think about your favorite YA literature books. So we'll give everyone a couple of minutes to really think about those. I know that some of us still love YA, but if you could think about, what they were when you were growing up, and what did you like about them? So we'll give everyone a couple of minutes and then we can do some sharing. Does anyone want to share?
I know it kind of takes a while to no, I don't think it's too cliche. It kind of takes a while for it to come back and think, what did I actually read when I was growing up? The Giver is a great one. Harry Potter is obviously near and dear to so many people's hearts. I remember getting a series of Unfortunate Events and picking those up as soon as they came out on the shelves. And I would also read them in the car. I couldn't wait to get home to start reading them. My mom would always yell at me and tell me that you're not supposed to read in the car. It makes your headaches worse and all of these things, but I just devoured them. I love them so much.
There was a little series of Fortunate Events game on the cell phone. I don't know if you ever played that, but it was on a flip phone. I would play it on my mom's, and it was so cool because it had all of the different chapters and all of the different books there. It was the best game ever.
Awesome. So I think I'm going to kind of take it over from here. I want you all to keep these books in mind because they'll kind of come back in a couple of slides, but we're going to get into the rest of the programming. So as I've said many times now, my name is Mayana Edwards. And this is a book unlike me, challenging our learners in New Hampshire to read a couple more windows as books. So I use the she series for my pronouns if you're trying to refer to me. Again, I went over my title. I am a dog mom to one little tiny baby thing. He's under my desk right now, but if I ever like scream, stop, Tucker, or anything like that while they're recording and the presentation is happening, I'm talking to my dog. His name is Tucker. He's the love of my life. I also have 52 plants scattered around my house. I might have had a slight addiction when COVID hit and I needed something to take care of. So now I have a ton of responsibilities. I love YA Lit. After Fabi and I finished our grad program, I did not want to read anything. I was so done with reading and writing. But what pulled me back in was young adult literature. I'm currently reading Beast of Prey by Ayanna Gray. It took me a very long time and I have to say it slowly to get it all out correctly. But I just love kind of being transported into this world and being able to read without kind of expectation of having this big grand paper or some profound thought at the end of whatever I'm reading. I just kind of want to read to enjoy, and young adult literature brings me there. That's some of my contact information if you want to make note of it. It does come up again at the end, so if you don't feel like it now, but you might want to later, it's there as well. So before I get into the programming that we do with the New Hampshire Gear Up Alliance, I kind of want to root all of this into some research and context. And from that, we're going to really lean into Rudine Seams Bishop's work on windows, mirrors, and doors. And those are just kind of the types of categories that books fall into. Books can be a door. This is a Narnia effect. You're kind of traveling through a closet into a new world, right? So this is your Harry Potters or your Narnias. This is an environment that is kind of magical, right? It's not realistic. It's not something that we see every day. Another category is a mirror. So this is a reflection of our own lives and our own experiences when we pick up a book and say, I know that character is me because I live that character. I have that curly hair, so I know what they're talking about. I share that religion, so I know what it's like to go to church on Sunday, right? That is what a mirror would be in terms of book. And then lastly would be a window. And that's a glance into lives and experiences that aren't ours. So we're standing outside of the house, but we're looking in, we're peeking into somebody's intimate life and something that we don't have firsthand experiences with. So those are the types of categories. Things can be a mirror and a window, or a mirror and a door. So if you think about Harry Potter, that's a magical, realistic or not realistic world. But I might see myself in Harry, or I might see myself in Hermione. So you can have that kind of harmony between the two, but mostly it happens with the door and then the other two categories. So I want you to just take a moment and think again back to those titles that we had said just a couple of minutes ago, what our favorite was. Was it a window, a mirror, or a door? What was that experience like? For you with the books that you were reading growing up? Feel free to pop it in the chat or unmute yourself and just kind of let us know what you were reading. That would be great. I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it. Mirror. I think my students, and I can talk a little bit about this later too, they respond better to any window. It does not matter. I think we have readers that read anything from graphic novels to humongous like autobiographies of folks. It really just depends on our students, but it's that exposure to the window. It's the exposure to the stories that look like them or don't look like them that really is important. If you pay attention to what they like to read in general, then you just find those diverse characters, or you find those diverse authors and you say, hey, what about this book? And then they usually kind of respond positively, but that really depends on the student and what they like to read.
I love that you used the word magic when you were explaining the doors, because mine was actually the Magic Treehouse series,
Yeah.
where it's like it was like a little history lesson in each book, and they would literally get into the treehouse and travel, like time travel, and just go to all of these different events in history. And so mine was definitely a door.
Thank you for that reflection. We're going to move away from this and talk about the landscape of diverse books. So what has this looked like for the past couple of years? I'm going to start us in 2015. And I do want to remind us that COVID did happen in 2020. Not that anyone needs a reminder of that, but some of the research, right, was negatively impacted by COVID and a lot. So while 2015 seems like that was a long time ago, kind of in this research world, it isn't, because there are kind of these almost lost years, if you will. So this is research from the Cooperative Children's Book Center out of the School of Education from University of Wisconsin-Madison. It's a long name. I've got the citation down at the bottom of the slide if anyone wants to check out their work. But they did an audit of children's books that were published that year in 2015 and kind of what characters were told those years. You'll see that 70% of the books that were published were of and about white characters. We've got 12.5% of books being written about animals, trucks, and almost inanimate objects, if you will. And then sort of everyone else is after that, which is kind of a little alarming, right? You've got about 8% of Black characters being written about, 3% of Asian characters being written about 2% Latinx characters, and not even 1% of Indigenous characters, right? So you see that although we talk about America being this great diversity place, we're not writing about them. We're not seeing stories written about children that are, you know, a part of our population. When we look at 2018, so jumping 3 years into the future, it kind of changes a little bit, right? We see this first number, 50%. That's, wow, that's a huge decrease, but it's kind of shrouded in some of this stuff, right? Because we see animals and other inanimate objects almost doubling, more than doubling that year, well, in those 3 years. Black characters get a little bit of a boost, so at 10%. Asian characters, they actually decrease a little bit. That's what these numbers down here at the bottom, just to recall that. Latinx characters get doubled, and Indigenous characters stay the same at about 1%. So it changes a little bit. We've got this big decrease with white characters to kind of even out with the population, but it doesn't reflect in other diverse characters, not nearly as much as it does with animals and other inanimate objects. As I was kind of mentioning before we got into this research, the statistics that we've gotten are a little bit different, and they kind of note that at the bottom of this chart. So due to the pandemic, some publishers did not send out new copies. So the numbers are a little bit different, but still we see that they're not really changed that much. Black characters, or these are books by and or about BIPOC individuals. So it can be written by or the main character is a BIPOC individual. So we're at 13% for Black characters. It's only up 10% since 2018. Indigenous folks, Indigenous characters, we are at 2%. So wow, they doubled, but we're still not where we should be. Asian characters, 10%, Latinx characters stayed at 7%. And then we see these two new demographics that the CCBC started to report on, which is Pacific Islander and Arab. So we're seeing some of this research change, especially due to COVID, but it's really not that great. And there's something to be said about us even promoting these stories in our classrooms. And that's what we are really trying to do with our programming. The last thing I want to take you through is a lost book. Does anyone know what that is? A lost book, essentially, these are the books that would need to be written by BIPOC authors to make up for an equitable diversity gap in the books that we're seeing. So a lot of these things, or these numbers coming up, are from Reflection Press in 2017. So thinking about how many books would need to be written by African-American authors to make up for this equitable diversity gap. If anyone wants to throw a guess in the chat, I'll give you about 15 seconds to think of a number, and then I'll let you know what it is. It's a good one. Anyone else has a guess? Not quite 30,000, but 524 books would have needed to be written in 2017 just by Black authors to make up for that diversity gap when we talk about population versus authors. This graphic here shows that. So not just thinking about Black authors and Black stories, but thinking about other authors and other stories that need to be told. 1,421 more books would need to be written in order to make up for the gap between US population and what is being represented by authors and characters. So that's just another thing that we think about. If you combine the last 12 years, we're talking about 6,000 books that would need to be written to make up for that diversity gap between 2002 and 2017. That's represented by this graphic. So this is from Reflection Press. Again, their citation is right at the bottom of the slide. So I would take a look there because there are a ton more infographics. And as this one says at the top, this is what we live with when we are silent. We are missing stories. And once those stories are gone, they are gone. We cannot get them back. So if we continue to just do what is done and go with it, because, well, we've read this book for so many years and we know it works, well, we're losing a lot of stories in the process and we lose out on a big piece of our culture. So what does the New Hampshire Garrop Alliance do to try to combat all of this, and how can we push this work forward in other programs? A book unlike me, well, if I back up a little bit, right? So what is the Garrop Alliance to begin with? We are made up of 2 Garrop grants. We have a partnership grant and a cohort grant. Our students are in 9th and 10th grade and 11th and 12th grade. Our 9th and 12th graders are with Garrop Manchester. They are serving that's one school district. It's at one of our most diverse school districts in the state. And then we've got 11th and 12th graders. That's a part of our Garrop New Hampshire cohort, and we serve 7 school districts across the state. Most of them are northern. And New Hampshire, sort of like this, it's very stereotyped and correctly stereotyped. It is very white here. We have a lot of white students. And so this emphasis on diverse characters and diverse BIPOC individuals writing those stories is really huge. We wanted to take a program that we already did, a book like me, and flip that on its head for our students that were in our 7 school districts up north. How can you read more windows into other lives, but still kind of take that forward in a respectful way? Some of our challenges in that grant that I was just talking about at the 7 school districts, we don't have staff that operate in the school building. In our Manchester grant, we do. We have 2 Garrop staff members in each of our high schools. And when we work in the middle schools, because the program is about gaining early awareness, so we do start in middle school, we usually have someone at the middle school and the high school. However, those folks don't necessarily have a huge hand in curriculum development or like major change at the school level. We can do our Garrop programming, but that doesn't necessarily affect what happens at the school at large. So a couple of challenges there, in that we cannot make permanent lasting curriculum changes or sweeping district changes, if you will. But we had this opportunity to revamp an existing program. Like I mentioned, we had a book like me that was specifically made for our Manchester folks, or our Manchester students, to really read more mirrors and read stories that were like them. A book unlike me was the concept that we would take it to the Garrop, New Hampshire districts and just do the opposite, right? Our challenge again, as I just kind of laid out, we had a lot of students reading mirrors and not a lot of windows in New Hampshire, and that's just what we wanted to attack. We wanted to get students reading. As I talked about, we're an early awareness program. So from the beginning, we just wanted to have students read more books. We didn't care what they were reading as long as they were doing it. And as long as they were thinking about identity and some components that made up identity. We wanted them to read more windows. So we wanted to expand that vocabulary for identity, understanding, and awareness of those who are not like them. And then we just wanted to get more diverse books in New Hampshire schools. So I don't know if y'all have seen this in the news or anything recently, but New Hampshire has been in a little bit of hot water as we think about legislation related to divisive concepts and students and teachers being able to teach or not in the schools themselves. So how can we bring in diverse stories while skirting around and kind of being able to protect teachers in the process? So it's not a teacher getting in trouble for teaching a divisive concept, but it's just us asking a student if they would like to read this on their spare time. So yeah, that's just promoting those stories in districts that don't otherwise read them. There were two ways to implement this idea. And one was to incorporate it into our existing summer reading program, which I'll dive into right now. Again, we just wanted students to read. We don't really care what you're reading as long as you are reading something and engaging your mind, especially over the summer where we're not doing academic work. So pick any book, be it a graphic novel, be it, you know, Captain Underpants or a huge Harry Potter novel. It doesn't matter, because what you're going to do is you're going to count your pages. So it's not based on how many books you actually complete, but the more equitable way to do that is how many pages you've actually read over the summer. And then a caretaker would sign off on it to just certify that, yes, the student did read that many pages today. It is a bit of an honor system. So we really trust our students and our parents to just be honorable. And that has actually played out really well. And it's been great. When we wanted to do this new iteration to really think about diverse books and diverse stories, we added extra credit for diverse authors, but also for Own Voices books. Mayana, you didn't tell us what Own Voices books are. What are those? Don't worry, I've got you. Own Voices is something that's attributed to Corinne DeVuy, and that essentially is saying the protagonist and the author have a shared identity in some way. So that can be socioeconomic status, that can be race, that can be religion, but as long as they share that identity, then that would be an Own Voices book, and that counts. And then the next way that we could implement this idea of reading more windows was into a 3-week program that really relied on those objectives I talked about. And so with that first week, we would really be thinking about naming identity. What does that mean to the student? How does that show up and be present in your everyday life? And really critically thinking about that. In the second week, we would all decide on a book to read together and read through that through the week. We would read through the windows and then try to call out how identity plays a part in the book that we were reading. And then of course, the third week, we would draw connections in our week to week, from our week 1 into our week 3 curriculum. We had these hashtags we were going to use, but honestly, our students loved the summer reading program so much that we focused on that piece and not necessarily this implementation piece, but that is another way you could do it. I'm going to pass by that. Before I get into recommendations, since doing these 2 implementation things, we've also found other ways to just incorporate diverse titles into our schools. Each of our Gear Up classrooms has a little diverse library in it. So it's actually the only library that Gear Up hosts ourselves. We supply a bunch of diverse titles. If a student says, hey, I really like this book, we also include that in there. And the students can come to their Gear Up coordinator and check out a book, read it, and bring it back to them just as if it was a normal lending library. But we really, again, have that emphasis on diverse stories and stories that matter to our students. So now some recommendations. This next couple of slides might be a little bit boring because it's just me reading off the titles, but I did take a class and I have read most of these books. They are very good. and you will have the slide deck at the end of this. So you will be able to have these recommendations too. So some books that are unlike my race, we've got The House on Mango Street, Children of Blood and Bone, and this one I really loved a lot. There's a second book number 2 to this is Children of Virtue and Vengeance, I believe. Very good. I loved it. And The Marrow Thieves was also a very good book that I loved. Unlike my culture, we've got Americanized Rebel Without a Green Card, With the Fire on High, and then American Born Chinese, which is a graphic novel that I loved so much. Yes, so good. The 57 Bus and Pet are so, I mean, I'm a YA lit book, so I know that I'm a YA lit lover, so I know I keep saying they're so good. I love them so much, but they are so good, and I do love them so much. The 57 Bus is a little bit, it's a sad story. It's a true story, but very good. And Pet is just exquisite writing. I really loved it a lot. And Almost Perfect is another one that you could look into. Unlike My Sexuality, The Revolution of Bertie Randolph, When the Stars Lead to You, and The Summer of Us. And then Unlike My Class, so thinking about socioeconomic status, we've got When We Collided, No Place to Fall, and More Happy Than Not. And I think this is the last bit. Unlike My Religion, The Dangerous Art of Blending In, Internment, and You Asked for Perfect. I know that was a lot. I might have talked a little bit fast, but does anyone have any questions? I haven't been looking at the chat, but this is some time if anyone does. Not, I think. Oop, awesome. I think what I'm going to do is just kind of wrap up from here. Fabi, I don't know if there is something that you would like to contribute.
No, I think that was great. Yeah, we really appreciate it. Here's our contact information for anything about this program. Mayana is definitely the person to contact. Anything else, feel free to contact myself or Jack. Here are our emails, and I also threw in my phone number there.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.